Good morning, Northeast Radio SD, Watertown, South Dakota. We've got a special guest with us today. It is time for the People's Community of Watertown, and we've got Watertown Mayor Ried Holien with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'm pumped to have you in here. It feels like another small milestone or like an accomplishment for our little local stations.
Well, I'm glad to help out. I mean, you've always done a really good job with the news in the community, and I appreciate what you do. And so if we can help out, be glad to.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we appreciate it. So it gives us kind of a little bit of time to break down a meeting, or maybe if there's concerns or anything even with the city that you've got going on. Recently, well, last night you had the city council meeting, so talk about some of that. Had a bridge maintenance or inspection report. I guess overall everything seems to be in pretty good condition, right? So.
Well, with the bridges, now first off, my reaction on that was probably not all that academic or smart, but I was thinking during the presentation we were talking to the gentleman who was giving the presentation, and we were asking him, like, why are the bridges ranked here? Because most of our bridges were ranked like 6, 7, or 8. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking it's like, okay, so that's like above average, or, trying to figure that out. And then he says, well, our grading system goes from 0 to 9. And I'm going, wait, what? It's like, why not go to 10? I mean, everyone just automatically assumes it goes to 10. So like I said, it wasn't anything super smart about it, but I was just going, why go to 9? I mean, it just seemed a little odd. But with that said, yes, most of our bridges are in very good shape. Some of the ones that I thought were noteworthy was like our bridge on, I think, First Avenue or Third Avenue, which is the old, very scenic, historic bridge in Watertown. That one was built in 1931, and that one still got like a 6. So that was rated very high. We did put some money into it over the years, but it's still doing very well. The only one that was doing poorly or is in need of repair or replacement here pretty soon is a small one on North Lake Drive, kind of by Compesca Lodge. And that one, they even said that probably 5 to 10 years we're going to have to do something about that. But everyone else was doing pretty good.
Yeah, they didn't have any load limit restrictions or anything. It wasn't necessary for any bridges.
Correct. Yeah. And so just for anybody who missed the meeting, we have 13 bridges inside the city limits of Watertown. We basically do a survey of half of them every year. So this year we did 7, next year we'll do 6, and we pay attention to those because you just don't want a bridge to deteriorate very fast and then have a situation where someone is on that bridge and it falls apart, or it can be very dangerous, and we don't want that, obviously. So we pay a lot of attention to our bridges.
Someone did mention too, a councilman brought up, I think it was Mormon, but on 212 there, the bridge that's kind of by Menards, which we found was kind of a DOT situation, but there's not really a sidewalk there, and so a constituent had asked them about it. So for something like that to be done, that's kind of got to be like a state deal, right?
I remember passing that word up to the State Department of Transportation several years ago when a pedestrian actually contacted me saying how annoying it was to try to get across that bridge. And I passed it along to the DOT, and they basically catalog it. They're not deaf to requests like that. It's just they might be slow moving, because you've got to factor in that they get requests like this from every community on every bridge inside the entire state. So I have a little sympathy for them, but at the same time, when it's their responsibility and I pass that along, I hope that they're paying attention, because we don't want an accident there. That would be like extremely bad. And I know that they don't want one either, but at the same time, it can be very slow moving. I'll give you an example. On North Highway 81 kind of by the Cowboy at the intersection of 14th Avenue and Highway 81. That intersection is very highly trafficked, especially when people are going to or from school. Because we've got is it the intermediate school? I always get confused on the terms because I grew up in an age where it was like
the middle school, Cowboy 3.
Yeah, so when people are leaving there, especially if they're going west and they want to turn onto Highway 81, like especially if they want to turn south on 81, you could get on that intersection, and when there was no turn lane, the cars would be piled up, sometimes 24, more than that, and you could wait there for a long, long time. And then it actually caused more problems because then people were trying to avoid it by speeding through the residential districts around there. So it took us a long time constantly talking to the State Department of Transportation saying, this is a situation, can you look at this? So they actually did send some people out, looked at it, and they agreed with us. Oh, that actually is a problem. And then we got a turn signal put in there pretty fast. That was just a couple of years ago, but that was a nice change. Nice. It gives you an example of what we have to work with.
Well, and at least, so if you do have a question on it, we know it's not the city necessarily in charge of the decision, it's the DOT, so they're relatively aware and kind of go from there. So it's on their radar, perhaps.
Yeah.
And also there was a final change order for 2nd Avenue reconstruction. They added something on some $64,000 on there. I don't think there was really any big changes or budget adjustments or anything like that that affects anything as far as any infrastructure issues, if you will.
No, it doesn't. In fact, that was more just I'd say housekeeping. And whenever the city, whenever pretty much any governmental entity does something like this where they take a project out to bid, they always factor in a certain percentage of, let's say, cost overruns or underruns. Sometimes, well, we don't factor in the underruns. We appreciate them when they happen, when a project comes in cheaper than is expected. But more often than not, they come back as a little bit higher because you start work on something and there can be all sorts of variables that can increase the cost, such as you could tear up a road and then you want to start replacing it, but then you get a week of rain and you're not going to be able to work then, and causes problems and it delays the project, which increases the cost. Those are factors that we take into consideration when we do a bid, and also the contractors that we hire for such projects, they always take those in as well. But in certain situations like this one, there is just some minor cost overruns, but it was like $60,000, I think it was roughly, 64,000, and it was a project that was $1.2 million. So 64,000 is not a small percentage of an overrun on a $1.2 million project, and I won't say that it's to be expected, but we're not terribly shocked when something like that happens. And I will say we actually have had pretty good luck here in Watertown over the last year of having more projects come in under budget than over budget. Won't necessarily say that there's more, but we've had a lot of projects that come in under budget, which is very nice.
Well, I thought this was kind of interesting too, these asphalt hot boxes, which normally maybe they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I thought it was kind of interesting because it shows, well, from the city, it's what I've noticed maybe with city manager Alan Stager, if it's him, but a different perspective with maybe some long-term investment or planning, I'm not sure, but it kind of shows a little different approach to one, that the city is actively working on street repairs, and for people that don't know how it works, but it kind of shows the quality of work that the city's putting into repairs and whatnot.
I'm actually really glad that you asked about this, because that was a small thing on the agenda last night, but it shows how we are trying and we are succeeding in doing better. So a hot box is basically just for lack of a better way of describing it, it's a small mini like cement mixer. So it's heated. One of the problems that we have here in Watertown is we don't have our own asphalt plant. So largely we have to send our crews down to Brookings. They fill up, they come back, they use everything that they go down there and they get. They repair potholes, and then they have to go back down and get more. So as an example, now we have two. So now a crew can be working here in Watertown while other people are going down to Brookings to get more. So we're not having like all these delays and people are just, you know, not that they ever sit around, they're always doing something, but especially in the summer, especially in the springtime, you want them out there fixing the potholes. So this is an example where it's a small expenditure, but it will have a large reward on the condition of our roads and it's just like doing business better. And I will congratulate City Manager Stager in particular for just noticing this and saying, well, why don't we do this? This is a much better way of doing it. And the other part of that conversation last night that didn't get much talked about and is something that I would like to point people's attention to was just a very short conversation about the timing of our capital improvement projects, our CIP, which is all of our equipment, all of our buildings in the city of Watertown is listed on the CIP because we know that they have to be replaced, they have to be maintained, and these are like huge costs because when you're talking all the vehicles that we have, now some of these are extremely expensive, you know, the snow blowers, the snow movers, the pickup trucks, the equipment we have out at the airport is extremely expensive. I mean, just one of those things to clear off the runways is like well over $100,000. So you start factoring in maintenance and repair and, you know, that we have to replace these every so often. Those are big expenditures that we take into consideration in our CIP plan. So two things that we've done with that is we've extended our CIP plan out farther so we can start taking into consideration things 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now as opposed to just 5 years, which is the way Watertown has always done it. That's number one way of that we're doing business much better. But the other thing is with situations like the asphalt hot box, we're not just automatically, we kind of had a policy where normally a vehicle or a hot box might deteriorate in like 8 years. That was an example of that question was asked last night. Why 8 years? Because that is typically how long they last before you have to get a new one or do like a major overhaul, in which case it's easier for a city to get a new one and then have someone else purchase the old one to rehabilitate that. That's also something we did last night. But in this case, we're adopting a new policy here in the city of Watertown that just because it's automatically listed as like 8 years doesn't mean we're going to do it then. Okay? No, start taking into consideration. I mean, pickup trucks are probably a better example. We had a policy where just like every X number of years we would replace a pickup truck, even if it was good, even if it was running well. I mean, everyone has those situations where, you know, everyone will talk about getting a lemon in a car where for some reason a car just has problems. But then there's also those cars that are just gems and that they just keep working and running forever, and they only require a little bit of maintenance. Why would we replace those? If we've got like a fantastic pickup truck, why replace it just because it's on the list of, oh, it's been 10 years, we need to get a new one? No, if it's a great vehicle, just keep it. And that's just it's a mindset difference to get government to think like that, but it's a great difference. And it's one of those examples. Like I said, the asphalt hot box showed two things that we are doing differently here in Watertown in changing the mindset of government.
Well, good, and that kind of leads into the budgetary talk we could go into with the supplement discussion, and there were some questions from council members too about some of it kind of dealt with like salary, overtime, I think, and budgets, dealing with that. Am I right? Something?
Yes.
Okay. Could you help me out with that a little bit?
Yes, so a little bit of backstory here. So last night we approved an agreement with the Watertown Police Officers Association, which is one of several unions that we have inside the city of Watertown. We have the police officers, we have a union at Watertown Fire Rescue, and then we also have a union of, let's say, office workers. It's called AFSCME, which I believe the acronym stands for Association of Federal, State, City, and Municipal Employees. Pretty sure. Mm-hmm. But in short, it's employees of a city in our case, and it's AFSCME is the acronym. So those three unions we have, and in particular with police and fire, one of the things that we could have done better in the past and are doing better starting last night is factoring in overtime. Because with police and fire, emergency calls, 911 calls are not limited to 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. In fact, they're extremely not limited to that.
Yeah.
So while we schedule our employees, our police and fire people, to be on schedule and working 24/7, there are different times where we have fewer people working or there are more calls that are coming in. And so in a situation like, let's say if there's a couple emergency calls and so you're sending a couple ambulances out on a call, those people and their shift is done, well, we're not going to let them just go home. You know, it's like they're on a call, they're attending to someone with a heart attack, and it's like, oh, sorry, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going home now. No. Yeah. And the thing is, the great thing is, our employees, they don't want that either. They're going to stay on the job when they're needed. Mm-hmm. And then there's more people who come on. So factoring in this overtime is something that we have to do because we know it's going to happen. And what happened was in the past, we didn't do a great job of factoring in overtime in our budget. And as a result, the two unions that are in particular susceptible to the emergency calls, the police and fire, had to try to schedule their employees schedule their employees and their costs without factoring in overtime. Because they limited it to like 5%. Well, you can't limit it because you don't know how much you're going to have. You have to budget accordingly, because if you budget less than what you can realistically conceive it's going to cost, mm-hmm. then what you're going to do is you're just going to have a situation like we did last night, which is you're going to have to do a budget supplement and say, oh, we underestimated, here's more money. And the reason why that's bad is because we know when we pass it ahead of time that it's not accurate, mm-hmm. or likely not to be accurate. Kind of goes back to the conversation about the hot boxes and fixing roads. We know that there's going to be some overruns. We appreciate when they're not and it comes in at budget or under budget, but you can't realistically do that every single year because you know there's going to be variations. It's kind of like the street department as well. We always factor in some extra because as much as I would like every snow event to happen from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, because that means that we're not paying people overtime to come in and plow our roads, we know that that doesn't happen. And we're not going to sit back and not plow roads over the weekend. That was tried in Watertown back about 15 years ago. That didn't go well. Nobody liked it. So we changed that, and we're not going to go back to that. But that's an example where, as a city, we have a lot of responsibilities that we have to factor in overtime. And in the case of last night with the police officers, we're changing how that's being done, mm-hmm. Both from a budget aspect and also in agreement with the unions.
And if it's done more efficiently up front, maybe then not only does it help with the supplements and the budget overall, but maybe that would help clarify or predict whatever comes of the east side station.
Oh, exactly. Too. No, you're exactly right, because having good budgeting, realistic budgeting that comes in according to your numbers just helps everything, because then we know what we're going to be spending, and so we can we know what we have to spend on other things, because we don't want to be in a situation, fortunately we've avoided it, but let's say something comes in way over budget on 911 calls or something like that, and we have to do a big supplement. Well, that's going to have to come from something else. So we're going to have to cut somewhere else, because we have to pay our personnel for the 911 calls. We have to pay our people to do the work that has to be done in the city of Watertown. But as a result, we're going to have to cut somewhere else when we do. So if you budget correctly ahead of time, you don't get into those situations where you have to make those hard decisions and possibly cut things that the community likes and needs, and it's just better government. Another example, if you don't mind me going off tangent here, but it's another example of how we have to factor in a lot of things, because I mentioned like the streets, and we don't know when snow is going to happen. Another thing, like this past springtime when we had all of that rain coming down, we had people working nonstop out at our wastewater plant. Again, something that people don't pay attention to, but believe me, they would if your sewer started backing up. And in a community where we don't have dedicated personnel working out at wastewater, working long hours of overtime, because we were having literally millions of gallons of extra water that we had to take care of, because we don't want it coming back into people's houses. But we never got a single complaint about that. I mean, there was problems in people's yards and things like that, but we can't do something about that. But what we can do is handle the pipes and make sure that it gets out of your system, because otherwise the entire system can backlog, and we don't want that. And I'll give you just another example of some of the things that we have to take into consideration that we hope doesn't happen, but we have to budget for it and realistically take that into consideration. Yeah,
especially it seems the salary or employee staff is kind of the number one that you have to consider when, the fire station, that was always kind of the one topic, was staff will be the number one thing to consider, whether or not we can make it affordable. So you'd want to have that as accurate as possible.
The number one asset of the city of Watertown at large is the same number one asset for the city of Watertown in a governmental aspect, and that's the people who live here. The people who live here, who work here, who make this a great place to live, because you can get along with your neighbor. It's a safe place. It's a great place. We have great people working for the city of Watertown, and they're our number one resource.
Well, that's good, because this that kind of leads into a little economic growth, if you will. Touch on just the newer license approval for the local downtown, the newer restaurant. That's kind of the newer license that was just put in, right?
God, not necessarily. This
Okay.
wasn't the special restaurant liquor license, because if you notice, this was just $75. This was more just clerical work to just get them one of the permits that they need, because for any establishment that is serving any form of alcohol, Councilman Hoyer did a good job of asking about that last night, because he asked in the fee section, why are some of them because if you get like a liquor license from the state, it's $1,500, but if you get a beer wine license, it's $300, but if you get there's 4 or 5 different levels and different costs associated with serving alcohol, different kinds of alcohol at your establishment. And so he would ask about that, and he asked, and the answer was largely those prices are set by the state, but to the extent that Watertown sets its fee limit. But in the case of the local last night, that was more just clerical work, just getting them permits that they need in order to open up their business.
Okay, all right. Well, either which way, I was going to follow up with how we haven't talked much about, have you gotten any of the tax reports or anything recently for how the economic of Watertown has been going
Oh,
lately?
actually, yes, to some extent we have. No, we always get our news, I'd say about 6 weeks later. So I always pay attention to the basically the income, the tax returns inside the city of Watertown, and almost all of our budget is from sales tax, and that is people who are spending their money here in Watertown on groceries, on Christmas presents. That's going to be my plug to shop local, because it helps everyone. It literally helps everyone, including the person shopping local. But we get almost all of our money from sales tax, so it's a very good indicator of the vibrancy of the community as far as people wanting to be here, wanting to entertain, go to restaurants, go to bars, go shopping, picking up everything that they need in order to live. So the sales tax numbers we pay very close attention to, because that's how we fund basically everything that we do. With that said, we have had 2 months in this calendar year that were bad months, that we actually went backwards compared to last year. And that's what we always do. We always factor in a 2% growth on a year-to-year basis. That's how we budget. And so when you have a month, I can't remember what it was, let's say March or April, where we actually are back, we're like 9% down from the previous year, I get really nervous. And believe me, I hear from the people who own businesses here in town, particularly retail stores, that they pay attention too. However, we've had a lot of really good months. We've had 2 months that were down from the previous year, but every other month has been higher than the previous year, and some of them considerably higher. August was something like 15% higher than the previous year. And like I was at the bid board, which is all the hotel owners in town, and we track how many people are staying in our hotels, because that's the third penny sales tax. That's also a big deal for Watertown. These are people who come into our community, rent our hotel rooms, and that generates a third penny of sales tax that the city can use, but it's limited to just specific items like maintenance on buildings. You can't use it to just spend money. It has to be dedicated to something. But we pay very close attention to it, and it is also directly correlated to overall spending. So when you get a 15% bump, I start asking around. I said, what's happening in Watertown? I mean, was there like a big state tournament? Was there multiple state tournaments going on here? Because that makes a big deal when you bring people in from out of town and I think it was partly because there was a softball tournament that brought in a bunch of people from out of town, so they're staying for a couple nights. That helps our hotels, it helps all of our restaurants, it helps our stores. That's a bump that we see directly, which is one of the reasons why, let's say with the ice arena, we wanted that, because it actually does bring in money. But in answer to your question, we're doing very well this year. We're growing at about an 8% rate, maybe just a little bit over. And we pay attention because we know that inflation is rising too, but inflation is rising at about a 4% hike this year. And so if we're growing at 8%, we're not just growing with the rate of inflation, because we don't want to just say like, oh, we're doing great, we're growing at 4% when everyone's paying 4% more for goods and services that they paid for last year. That doesn't impress me. But if we're growing at 8%, that means that we actually are growing as a community, that we are vibrant, that we have places that people want to spend their money.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, and I think too, even though you do have inflation, I know it's got to be figured in, but realistically, you still have people. It's showing that you have people that are spending money on products, regardless of what they cost. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's that. So the other thing that I was just going to touch on really was just kind of an overall. I don't think that there's anything pressing, but do you have, as the mayor, do you have anything with it's not much of a city thing, but with legislation and the session coming up, do you have anything that you are thinking of or that's on your mind or anything?
Definitely paying attention to several things that are coming up on the legislative session. There's a lot of talk about property tax repeal at the state level. We pay attention to it, but as in my position as a mayor, I'm not overly concerned about it. I think it would be, if you start cutting property taxes or eliminating them altogether, as some people advocate, that's a lot of money, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that the state is going to have to find revenue from coming in from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The city of Watertown's budget does not depend upon property taxes. We get a very small portion of our funding from property taxes. Only a very small portion of your property tax as a homeowner or landowner goes to the city. The vast majority of it goes to the school system and the county, and the city gets a very small percentage of it, under 10%. So we don't depend upon that for our annual budget, but the state depends greatly upon that, and we depend on the state for matching funds for some of our things. Our airport, most everything that we do at the airport gets some kind of matching from the state. When we do some of our road constructions, again, state matches. So if the state loses half of their budget, which I think it roughly could be. Again, don't quote me on that, but it's a huge portion of their budget. If they were to just wipe that clean, then that's going to affect Watertown. But it's going to affect South Dakota even more than that, because you're talking now a state that can't maintain its own roads, can't keep employees hired in all of their services. So that would have ramifications throughout the state that would affect Watertown. From our budget, from just Watertown's budget, I'm not overly concerned about it, because like I said, we don't depend upon property taxes for our budget. And even if we lost some of the matching funds from the state, it would limit what we could do, and we would have to cut back on some of our projects, which people would see. So we're paying attention to that. But as far as like funding our police, our fire rescue, some of the other things that we do that make Watertown a great place to live, it's not going to, I'm concerned about it, paying attention. And there's like 27, I think I've been paying attention, there's like 27 different proposals coming forward from the Summer Task Force on property taxes. And it's going to become very complicated for the legislators to figure that out in the very short session that they have, because 27 ideas being brought forward, how are you going to coalesce around one or two ideas that actually moves the needle where people want it to lower property taxes or eliminate them, but then also to come back and fund the huge hole that is going to be created? I don't know how they're going to get there, but I'm going to be watching it very closely. Mm-hmm. And actually, City Manager Stager and I have even talked about trying to find some time to dedicate to going out to Pierre for the legislative session to advocate for Watertown, kind of be lobbyists for Watertown in the case where it would affect our community and other communities of our size, and in Northeast South Dakota. So Northeast, basically everyone listening to Northeast radio right now can be affected, and we've been talking about going out there and doing that. Another thing that we've been paying attention to for the legislative session is TIFs, or tax increment financing districts. There is a contingent in the state legislature and in the citizens of South Dakota that view TIFs as wasteful and almost criminal. I know that there's definitely some people out in West River that are saying that it's completely unnecessary and wasteful, because they're talking about doing like a TIF for like their big it's like a theme park for Wild West theme park for Rapid City, but it's like a lot of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars, and people are saying, wait a minute, is that stealing from the taxpayers? TIFs are extremely complicated because it's supposed to be limited to basically dilapidated properties. So if you've got an open field or like a building that is fallen apart and you need to revamp it, a TIF can be used to say, like, right now that's generating no tax. But if we go in there and we revamp it and we turn it into something that can be used and is an asset to the community and can generate some taxes, well, what you can do then is you can actually defer some of those taxes into the TIF to help pay for the construction. It makes it more attractive to renovate a property or something. It makes it more attractive for a contractor to come in and do something, because they know that they believe they can get more money. But a lot of that depends upon how the TIF is written, because you have to value what the property is now, what it might become, and then how much taxes it would generate, and then how you defer it. It gets extremely complicated, and I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it, but let's just say it can be an important economic tool for a community to use if done correctly. Watertown has a lot of TIFs. Some of them are not performing all that great. They're not generating the revenue that we had anticipated. Some of them are doing fantastic. I personally would like to keep TIFs as a tool in our toolbox for economic development in Watertown, but there are some people who just want to wipe them and do away with them completely. I think that would be a little drastic. I think what could be done, should be done, is just do them better. So that's another example of something I'm at least paying attention to. But with that said, I would have to see the actual proposal. I'm not opposed to, some sort of tweaking or doing it better. In fact, I'm in favor of it. But
yeah, it always seems when somebody wants to wipe out something completely, they maybe came across a real bad experience, and it's like one bad apple ruins the tree or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But well, okay. Anything else from that? Good.
I'll just plug one more time, shop local. It's Christmas season. It makes a huge deal to everyone who lives here, including you, because if you like driving on good roads, if you like having your snow plowed off your road, if you like having an ambulance coming to your door if you had a heart attack, these are all things that depend upon tax dollars, which depends upon people shopping locally.
Absolutely. So that's very true, and we believe and support it, so that's why we say shop local and advertise local, because we all take care of each other, and it's a community that, community first, really. So that's what we're here for, and we appreciate you coming in here and sharing more details on the city operations. People can send us messages if they do have questions, and we can let you know ahead of time so we can have a prepared answer. Or a educated answer.
So I know I'm being live streamed.
So.
I'm not supposed to. Am I supposed to look at the camera or not? I don't even know. But
I don't either.
I didn't know, but I figured would look at you. But I hope anybody who's watching this, if you have any ideas, contact Steve here at Northeast Radio. He does a great job. If it's a deeper dive into a topic, I think we'd both welcome a chance to delve into something a little bit deeper. Yeah, one way or another we can find a way to get the information and get you guys educated. So that's it for your first episode of the People's Pulse, and we thank Mayor Ried Holien for coming in and joining us, and that is brought to you by Arrow Paper Products.